All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on predicting exposure to hazards using the exposure control database. We're going to go ahead and get started momentarily. I'm just going to go over a few quick things. My name is Jessica Bunting. I'm the host and tech support for this event. So if you have any technical difficulties or any questions at any time, you can either email me by responding to the WebEx reminder email that went out about an hour ago, or if you're logged in, you can send me a message via the chat box. I will do my best to help you through any difficulties that you are having. But we will also be recording the event, so if we can't resolve whatever is going on, you will automatically receive an email with a recording to watch at your leisure. If you cannot see the chat or Q&A box on the right hand of your screen already, you can make those appear by clicking on the associated buttons down on the lower bottom middle of your screen. We will take questions at the end, but you can enter them into the Q&A or chat box at any time during the presentation. If you have trouble hearing through your computer speakers, it may be because of your internet bandwidth, and we recommend calling in using your phone instead. In order to make sure you don't end up hearing audio from both your computer and your phone at the same time, you'll either have to switch the audio connection by using the Communicate menu at the top of your screen, or you can simply turn off your computer speakers manually. Again, we will be recording the webinar today. I will send that out and a PDF of the slides and any links that are covered today in an email in a few days, so you don't have to worry about capturing any of that. Our presenters today are Dr. Babak Memarian, Director of Exposure Control Technologies Research at CPWR, and Sara Brooks, Industrial Hygienist, also at CPWR. And with that, Babak, I'll go ahead and let you get started.
Thanks, Jessica. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Babak Memarian, CPWR's Director of Exposure Control Technologies Research. And as Jessica mentioned, I'll be co-presenting with my colleague, Sara Brooks. Sara has been the lead industrial hygienist on this project. First, I will provide a quick background of the project about the exposure control database, and then Sara will walk you through the website and run a few examples on how to use the database. The exposure control database is a part of CPWR's Construction Solutions program under a 5-year cooperative agreement with NIOSH. And we started development of the database since about 3 years ago in a close collaboration with NIOSH researchers, trades unions, representatives, and other industry partners. But what is exposure control database? So this database is a searchable database. It's a web-based tool that estimates worker exposure to 4 major hazards, including silica, welding fumes, lead, and noise using objective exposure data. But it should be noted that at this stage, we use just the data that comes from construction field operations, and we tried not to use lab data or data that's generated through simulation. But we might use it down the road. But for proof of concept, and at this stage, we just use the field operation data. We have gathered majority of our data from reliable sources such as peer-reviewed articles and government reports. And we have also received some data from our external industry partners, mainly for silica. So they shared their air sampling data with us, and we use that in the database. With that, I would like to turn it over to Sara to walk you guys through the website and to see how it works. We'll run a couple of examples to get a little more hands-on experience. And as Jessica mentioned, we'll take the questions at the end of the session. Thank you. Sara, please.
Hi, everyone. So I'll be taking you on a walk through the database, showing you how to use it and some of the functions it has. So I'm just going to switch over to the internet browser. Okay, so here we have our landing page. You can see we have 4 hazards to choose from: silica, welding fumes, noise, and lead. I'm going to start out by doing a few searches for silica. So once you decide which hazard you're interested in, you click on that hazard box, and that will take you to the search page. On the search page, I am going to run a search for cutting fiber cement siding. So let's say you were doing a project where you had to cut fiber cement siding and you wanted to see what your exposure might be if you were to use local exhaust ventilation, and then also if you were to not use any local exhaust ventilation at all, and what that difference might be. So first I'm interested in seeing what it might be if we had no local exhaust ventilation. So I'll select my task, which is cutting fiber cement siding. We'll be using a circular saw. Of course, cutting fiber cement siding. We'll first see what our exposure would be if we had no controls. We'll be doing the job outdoors, and we'll select all project types just to cover all our bases. So you would click the Submit button to submit your search, and then that would navigate you to the results page. At the top of the results page, you can see a summary of the search that you just put in. Below that, you can see that this particular search has an entry on OSHA's Table 1 of the new silica standard. So if you were interested in more information on that, you can click the link up at the top. And then we have our 2 main results boxes. The expected exposure box shows that given this particular scenario, you can expect to have an exposure of about 75 micrograms per meter cubed of respirable crystalline silica. That is above the OSHA PEL and the OSHA action level. And you can see in the measurement distributions box on the right that 76% of the 17 measurements that were retrieved that fit this search are above the PEL, and 24% are below the action level, and none are in between. We can also see down here the maximum and the minimum, so there's a pretty wide spread between those two. And then below there are useful resources that you can use. Most of them are either NIOSH websites or CPWR resources that can help you learn how to control your exposure. Also a link to a sampling form that I'll talk about a little bit later. And then below that we have our sources, which shows you the 2 articles that these 17 data points were pulled from. So this tells me that performing this particular job without local exhaust ventilation would put me above the PEL. So if I wanted to see how this might look if I were to use local exhaust ventilation, you can perform a new search. And I will enter the same search, except I'll use local exhaust ventilation as the control method. And I'll submit this search. And we can see that with local exhaust ventilation, our exposure has lowered significantly to 17 micrograms per meter cubed, again, which is the geometric mean of all of the measurements in the database. So we can see that there are 45 measurements that fit this particular scenario. 71% of them are below the action level, 16% are below or between the PEL and the action level, and 13% are above the PEL. So we should still proceed with caution, especially given that the maximum is still fairly high, but we can see that with local exhaust ventilation, our exposure is going to be significantly lower on average. The same useful resources are underneath to help you figure out what to do and what the next step might be. And here are our sources if you were curious as to where the data comes from or wanted to take a look at the articles yourself. So we also have a history function, which is specific to each module. So if you wanted to see your previous searches for silica, you would click on history while you're performing a silica search, and it would show you your 3 most recent searches. I'll do one more search for silica. If you know what task you're interested in but don't want to search through the whole menu, you can type it in and it will find it for you. So if I'm interested to know what my exposure might be if I were tuck pointing using a tuck point grinder, of course mortar. If I wanted to know what it might look like if we were using local exhaust ventilation, I would enter that into the control method menu. We'll say outdoors, and we'll be doing a renovation project. And these menus are only populated with the data that is in the database. So if you are looking for something that isn't in this menu, say you were curious about this situation on a new construction project, that will be put in the database as soon as we find data for it. So keep checking back if you can't find something you're looking for. We're going to be adding new data regularly. So with this particular search, we can see that we only have 3 measurements returned. In cases where we have less than 6 measurements, we don't really think it's meaningful to give a geometric mean, so we would just present the individual data points right here. So we can see that for this particular scenario, our 3 measurements are 27, 15, and 6 micrograms per meter cubed, which are all below the PEL and mostly below the action level. We have our maximum again, and we can see that using local exhaust ventilation for this situation, we would probably be pretty well controlled. And if you are curious as to how a certain task tool combination that's on table 1 would look, you can access this CPWR resource, which will give you an easier way to understand the requirements set forth on table 1. So I'm going to perform one more search, this time for noise. We'll return to our main search page, and we'll click on the noise hazard. So the search here looks a little bit different. Let's say during my shift, I am going to be using a circular saw. I know it is a DeWalt, but I'm not sure what the model is. I'll be cutting wood, and I'll be cutting for about 2 hours and 15 minutes. So I set my time, and then during this shift, let's say I'm also going to be using a hammer drill. Click yes, and the search that we just entered will be up here at the top, so you can refer to it if you need to. And then I'll enter my second tool, which is a hammer drill. Say it is also a DeWalt, and in this case, I know that it's a Z25103. Be cutting concrete. And I'll be performing this task for about 2 hours. I won't be using any other tools during my shift, so I'll click no. Both our searches will appear at the top, and then I will submit them. And we can see our search summarized at the bottom, a DeWalt circular saw and a DeWalt Z25103 hammer drill. We can see that our noise exposure is going to be 107 decibels with the circular saw and 100 decibels with the hammer drill. And we can see a summary of the task duration that we entered at the bottom as well. And given these tasks and this amount of time, we can see that according to the OSHA permissible exposure limit, our noise dose for that 24-hour period will be 4 times higher than allowed by law. And then we can also see to the right that the NIOSH recommended exposure limit NIOSH criteria will expose us to a dose that is 53 times higher than recommended. So this would tell us that we needed to either rethink the tools we're using or consider PPE that would protect workers' hearing. Useful resources are a little different, but also show you some CPWR resources that can help you reduce your exposures. Construction Solutions is a good resource. It has a lot of summaries of engineering controls and personal protective equipment that might be relevant. As with the other branches, we have our sources, which shows you where all these data points come from. If we're interested in prior searches, we can also go to the history and see searches from the noise branch. If any terms are unfamiliar or if you're curious about anything, you can go to the glossary for a quick summary of some of the terms and abbreviations. You can also use the buttons on the right to print your screen, email your screen, or return to perform a new search. So that is the basic functionality of the exposure control database. If you're curious, you can perform some searches on welding, fumes, and lead on your home computer. So throughout the development process, we've had a few challenges. Some major challenges were data availability and data quality. Some of the solutions that we've come up to address this were 2 sampling forms that CPWR developed to make data collection easier, clearer, and more accessible for everyone. We have one for respirable crystal and silica and one for noise. The forms have contact information for CPWR and for myself, and fields for required variables and measurements. And they also come with a list of sampling recommendations and some quick general recommendations for the process. Here is a picture of the respirable crystal and silica form. We're at the top of it, and at the bottom of the page is the URL that you can go to access that form. And here is the noise form. It's the same URL at the bottom. And if you have any data that you feel would be a good fit for the exposure control database or that you're interested in sharing, please let us know. We're very interested in any data you might have for any of the hazards. Obviously, the more data we have, the better the database is. So anything that you might be willing to share, we would be very interested to take a look at, and we would really appreciate your help. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and I guess we'll turn it over to Jess to see if there's any questions.
All right, great. Thank you, Sarah and Babak. We do have a few questions coming in. First, are any other hazards going to be added?
Well, there is no specific plan at this moment to add any new hazard, but maybe in the future, it depends on the demand, we should see. But there is no immediate plan for that. But our priority is just focusing on these 4 and expanding the database and adding more data to the database for these 4 for now.
Okay. Next question, what consideration should be given to search results that do contain results above the PEL, but the geometric mean is below the PEL? Would a regulatory body be satisfied that our employees were not at risk for overexposure? Specifically, this is referencing the example that you showed for silica, where the database contained a result with an LEV that was 180 milligrams over meter squared, but the mean was 17.
So this is not explicitly meant to be a regulatory tool. You would have to use your personal judgment, and in that situation, if we can see that the majority of measurements are below the PEL, but some measurements are far above the PEL, that there certainly should be considerations made for that, and better to be safe than sorry. And your PPE decisions or decisions on what control method to use should be governed by using an abundance of caution. So if that answers your question, I think that it's not necessarily something that a regulatory body would abide by.
And just in reference to that, I believe, Sarah, you showed the tip sheet that we have available and on following the standard and Table 1, but we also have other resources on our website, silicasafe.org, specifically for figuring out what controls to use to stay below the PEL. The next question is, what about the noise of others using tools in the same environment? Do you take that into consideration?
So since the decibel scale is logarithmic, it's pretty forgiving when there are multiple noise sources together. I don't think that 2 noise sources in the same room which is very common on construction sites. And in fact, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find any place where there weren't multiple sources of noise. But those two sources would not combine to increase the overall decibel level significantly enough that we think that that's something that we should have built into the system.
Okay. Is this a subscription-based tool?
Nope, it is free for anybody to use at any time.
Okay. Do you have any plans to develop it for mobile devices?
Well, there is a potential plan based on the survey that we ran a few months ago. Obviously, there is an interest for mobile application, but whether we are going to redevelop the whole database in mobile application, that is, I would say, probably not. But we have a plan probably to put it's called the website wrapper, to provide an icon. It's semi-mobile application, but it still it functions. It provides all the functionality of the database on your mobile devices. But in summary, I can say yes, eventually this will be something usable on mobile devices. And even in its current format, the desktop format that we have, you still can run it on your mobile devices, on your phone or on your tablet. You can use the same URL and see all the functionality, and the page is responsive. You can use it on your mobile devices as is. But again, in future there is a possibility, yes.
Okay. Lead in soil at construction sites is widespread, especially in urban environments. Do you have information in the database for lead exposure during excavation of soils containing lead? And if not, is this something that will be added in the future?
I don't believe we have any data for that particular situation in the database right now, but moving forward, any data that we receive or are able to find would certainly be added, and if that's something that anybody happens to have any data for, we would appreciate if you let us know, and we'll certainly keep searching through the literature ourselves, and hopefully we would be able to find enough situations to satisfy all users.
And to add to that, you should note that the combinations that you see on the website currently, these are the combinations that we have data for in our database. It is not pre-populated. As we add new data to the database, you will see the new combinations pop on the menu. So that's why, as Sara said, we are looking for more data to add and to expand it.
Okay. Next question is, do you think your data can be used instead of doing an exposure assessment?
No, I don't. I think it's an assistive tool, but I think that, the gold standard is to perform an exposure assessment on the actual, task that is being performed. So I would not say it is a substitute, no. Okay.
How long was the sampling time for the silica samples?
They're different. We have a minimum of 45 minutes, so no data that's included will be for a sampling period of less than 45 minutes. And I think our maximum is something like 9 hours, but each measurement is a time-weighted average 4-time samples.
Okay. How do we get access to the database, and is it available through the CPWR website?
You can access it by using the URL at the bottom of the screen, and it will be accessible on the CPWR website very soon.
Okay, to people asking about the presentation, trying to print it, etc. Again, I will send out a recording of the full event, and I will also send out a PDF of the slides within the next few days, so you can print it that way. The next question is, does this give the TWA for a combination of tools or just individual tools, and what was the testing time again?
So for the silica, welding fumes, and lead branches, the time period of the samples would be anywhere between 45 minutes and about 8 hours. And I'm sorry, what was the first part of the question?
Does this give the TWA for a combination of tools or just individual tools?
Oh, for those 3 branches, it only gives the TWA for individual tools. The noise branch is the only branch that currently has the ability to give you results with more than one test tool combination.
Okay. Let's see. My employees are inspectors with an engineering construction management firm. Our activities are not operational, however, we are in the general area. Should we have to take the same precautions as workers who are on top of the work or doing the work?
I guess that all depends on, well, it depends on a lot of things, how close you are, the wind direction. I think that's something that, you know, a qualified individual would need to make an individual judgment for on each construction site.
Okay. For lead, is there a way to distinguish between lead-containing paint and lead-based paint?
Well, so our measurements are of micrograms per meter cubed of lead. So it wouldn't really matter where it came from. It would just show you the, you know, the airborne concentration. So no, it would not tell you how much lead was in the paint.
Okay. Are the data collection forms available on the website?
The data collection forms are available on the website. I will switch back. At the bottom of this slide, you can see where to access them. And again, none of the sampling was performed by us at CPWR. It was all pulled from peer-reviewed literature, government reports, or external partners in industry.
Okay. Do you plan on expanding the lead portion of the database to include more construction/renovation tasks such as demolition?
Well, a lot of our measurements that we have right now are from demolition, but we hope to continue expanding it and pulling more and more data. And you know, the more data we have, the better the database will be, and the more informative it will be.
And one note here is that we just finished development of the database, and so the data sets are small and limited. So, and as Sarah said, the more data we receive, so we will expand it, and then, but it all depends on, you know, how much data we can find and for what scenarios, because we are not doing the air sampling ourselves, so we have a little bit of limited resources there, and we are kind of dependent on the availability of data and the data that data owners share with us.
Okay. We have gotten a few comments that are not really questions, and I just want to say thank you very much for the suggestions, and I will definitely be making sure that Sara and Babak get those. I'm just not going to read them aloud today. One more question. Could you do outreach to BIM developers such as Autodesk, Trimble, et cetera? And would you be able to provide an API access to your data to provide in-app alerts when a planned activity will exceed safety thresholds? I don't know that you've given this any thought.
If I can answer the first question. As far as the collaborating with those enterprises mentioned to incorporate this in BIM models, there are some ideas, but maybe for longer term, not immediately. But that would be very, I think that would be very useful down the road if we could, you know, sync this database with BIM models and also to store and mine the data for the, you know, hazard-related data into the model for future application. That is something we've already thought about it, but when we will be able to develop that, I cannot answer at this moment. But that was a great question, and we will definitely consider that for future expansion of the database. But I think Sarah is more qualified to answer the second part of the question. If you could repeat that.
Would you mind repeating the question, Jess?
Yes. sorry, I have to find it again. Okay. Could you do outreach to BIM developers and provide an API access to your data to provide in-app alerts when a planned activity that's input will exceed safety thresholds?
Oh, well, so, okay, sir. So that takes a little bit of, that's not going to be easy. It's a great question and comment, as I said, but it takes a little bit of work, and we should think about it. But I think in future, these are things that we will add to the database based on resources availability, because we have some limitations. And sometimes it's a little bit complicated working with those enterprises because they have their own, requirements. But in summary, probably I would say, yeah, probably we could do that.
Okay. We got a few more questions in. For the RCS fiber cement board samples, does it account for different tools? Is it specific to Table 1 requirements? And does it account for size or density of the board?
It does not account for size or density of the board. We thought that if we had our categories be that specific, that we wouldn't be able to get meaningful results. We wouldn't be able to have enough results for them to be meaningful. And what were the first two parts of the question?
Okay, sorry, I was on mute. For the RCS fiber cement board samples, does it account for different tools? In parentheses, is it specific to Table 1 requirements?
It does account for different tools. I think at this point we only have 3 different tools for the data that we have in our database, but hopefully that will expand in the future. And I believe on Table 1, fiber cement is being cut with circular saw, so I think that would be specific to Table 1, but again, I'd have to check that, and I don't have it in front of me, so I don't want to say for sure.
Okay. During the presentation, you showed an attachment with exposure control methods. How do I get to that?
If that's referring to the sampling form and the directions of how to do sampling, those would be available on the first page of those sampling forms at the URL on the bottom of the page. I think that's what that question was referring to. But if it isn't, please feel free to get in touch with me.
Okay. What about the testing information that OSHA gathers from around the country? Can you tap into the results they've accumulated and plug them into this database?
So that's something that we did look at. A lot of the data in OSHA's, the OIS database, does not have all the variables we're looking for, so we weren't able to include it. And also a lot of OSHA data is taken for compliance purposes. Obviously, it's kind of a worst case scenario. And this database is meant to be more general, so we don't really think that OSHA data taken for compliance purposes would be a good fit for the database.
All right, I think that about wraps up our Q&A unless we have any last minute questions. But if I missed anything or if you think of a question after the event today, feel free to send me an email and I will get you in touch with Babak and Sara. And again, I will be sending out everything we discussed today so that you can access it at your own convenience. And Babak and Sara, thank you very much for presenting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.